This is one of those topics that no one really wants to think about, but if you're a parent, a homeowner, married, or helping take care of aging parents, it's something that honestly deserves a little attention. I'm talking about estate planning. And before you tune out thinking it's complicated or expensive, that's actually why I want to mention Trust and Will. Trust and Will makes estate planning feel way less intimidating than it sounds. They offer modern, attorney-designed wills and trusts that you can create online. And the process is surprisingly straightforward. In fact, you can create a will in as little as 30 minutes. That includes things like guardianship for your kids or pets, how your assets are distributed, and even healthcare directives. Don't wait until it's too late. Protect your loved ones with Trust and Will, the most trusted name in online estate planning. Go to trustandwill.com/future to get 20% off. That's trustandwill.com/future for 20% off. trustandwill.com/FUTURE.
Frequency Podcast Network. Stories that matter, podcasts that resonate.
Artificial intelligence is all around us, just about everywhere you look. Even Starbucks is now turning to the technology, not to make the coffee, but to help cut costs by developing its own inventory software. At the same time, there's a hesitancy, maybe a concern, some of it coming from inside the tech industry. And whether we accept it into our lives or not, it's also costing us. But is it worth the cost? I'm Kris McCusker, and in this episode of In This Economy, we speak to Richard Lachman, professor of digital media at Toronto Metropolitan University. He's also the author of Digital Wisdom: Searching for Agency in the Age of AI. Thank you so much for taking the time. First, if you could, for people who don't really understand, AI has been taking off just about everywhere you look. We hear about it all the time. What does it really mean? Like, this is a technology, as I understand it, if I'm oversimplifying, that is intended to make our lives easier. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I have to say, anyone who can answer any question about AI, short, simple, with a single yes or no, is not really paying attention. Yes, it's supposed to make our lives easier. It is supposed to increase productivity. It's supposed to do amazing things for us. And at the same time, I'm sure many listeners have a feeling of dread when you hear another news story about another new capability of AI in many different workplaces that we used to think were not really the realm of automation or technology. More people are worried that they don't know what it's going to do to their jobs. They don't know what it's going to do to the film industry. They don't know what it's going to do to reliability of news and information sources. There are ways, there's some incredible aspects of this that are an unalloyed good, I think. There's uses of AI in scientific research, in drug testing and drug discovery that are phenomenal. The researchers are finding their capabilities are incredible. But it's these other cases where it's being used in our daily life. It's being used in phone scams. These are cases where, there's a lot of worry. This wasn't the kind of thing we thought of in science fiction movies of 5 or 10 years ago. This wasn't really, it's moving into areas we didn't know were really where AI would be effective.
And in a lot of those cases that you outlined, there are sort of potentially dangerous consequences.
Absolutely. So I want to be clear, there's a lot of different kinds of AI. Most of what we talk about here is called generative AI, but there are other forms of AI that are built in very specific ways. Generative AI is where it's built on statistics. It looks at a lot of stuff in human language, and then it can use that to generate what seems like magic to us, but is basically just saying, if I see these words, maybe someone has said them, maybe someone has typed them in as a question, statistically, what are likely words that would appear after them, based on everything I've read, everything I've seen around? That can seem really powerful and incredible. I would say none of that, and it's important for us to realize, none of that is based on an AI, a ChatGPT, Claude, understanding the topic you're asking about. There is no computing really had these two ways. In one case, someone has programmed carefully rules. Here's how math works. 1 + 1 = 2. Here is the capital of Canada. Here is, how to assemble an aircraft maintenance procedure. And someone's carefully programmed that. So someone with knowledge has put that knowledge in a computer. AI doesn't function that way. AI has looked at a lot of those examples, but it itself is trying to answer the question, what's most likely, statistically, the thing that can happen next? And sometimes, if we aren't carrying that top of mind, um, we're imagining that maybe the advice it gives us is based on really understanding our question or understanding our problem. We need to be, so that the risks can be, we trust it more than we should. The mistakes it makes aren't front of mind because most of us don't have a sort of, you don't have to be a computer scientist, but you do have to know what are the kinds of things it can get wrong? What are the kinds of areas where it's likely okay to use and the kinds where maybe I shouldn't? Because it will give you an answer to any question you ask it. Some of them you should not pay attention to. Some of them are more likely to be worrying, but it will give you an answer anyway. It won't tell you, oh, by the way, this is the kind of thing I sometimes get wrong.
Are there also biases associated with some of the answers that are generated?
Yeah, there's two ways where a lot of ways where bias can creep in. One is, as you say, the decision makers of the people making them. So you always have to ask in these questions, who made it? What is their interest in making it? How do they get paid? So that might color what it is they make. But the other side is, remember, I said it's trained on statistics. It's trained on the internet. Well, the internet is not always 100% reliable. In some cases, if you're in the middle of a conversation with the chatbot, you can ask, is the earth flat? And I, based on my high school geography class will tell you, I don't believe the earth is flat. But a lot of people on the internet do. So statistically, it's possible that my chatbot might say yes, because statistically, what would someone on the internet say in response to that question? That's an example, but we know that our biases around gender. This was true in earlier examples. You would ask it, generate an image of a doctor. It will generate a male. You say generate an image of a female healthcare professional, it will generate a nurse, not a female doctor, because it was trained on the internet, and those biases are on the internet. They're in the images that were categorized or the data sets that AI was trained using. So those biases can creep in even without someone choosing to say, I am malevolent, I'm evil, I want to make an AI that does bad things. That doesn't have to happen. Just by being trained on undifferentiated pools of knowledge, the biases, the angers, the misunderstandings that are on the internet or in books or in certain volumes that it was trained on seep into its answers, and it will present those answers prickly, happily, cheerily, telling you, great question. It'll present them very confidently because the nature of talking to an AI is very chatty. It doesn't, it maybe should make you feel a little more nervous than it does. It makes you very comfortable sometimes with what, as you say, are very biased answers.
Well, and it's interesting to me because you have just written a book. I'm guessing this is here's everything you need to know about AI kind of book.
It's trying to be a little more broad than that. So, of course, the danger of writing about AI would be you are obsolete 3 weeks after that book came out because something new came. So what I'm trying to do is take a step back and say these kinds of technologies, like AI, like social media, what are the conversations we, as a wider society, need to be having about them? The way I talk about it in the book is I'm an engineer by training. I'm a computer scientist. I should not be in charge of the world. I have one point of view, and your listeners, with their professions, with their backgrounds, with their families, with their histories, have very different points of view. And society depends on all of us because we all get a vote. But right now, the engineers are building things that are ending up becoming in charge of a lot. They are informing decisions about government programs, decisions about whether you get a loan, decisions about healthcare, decisions about mental health. And there's a great Jane Jacobs quote. Jane Jacobs wrote a lot about cities. And one of the things she said was, cities are amazing when they are built by the people who live in them. Then they are lively. Then they represent you. And that is true about technology too, especially technology as wide-ranging as AI. So in my book, I talk about so it doesn't require you to be an expert, but what little bits do you need to understand so that you can think about these big questions that we as a society need to address? Because I don't want OpenAI, an American company built by venture capital and some particular individuals, to be in charge of what the rules of Canadian society are. I want us to know enough to be asking the right questions, to be valuing our individual knowledge. I want the knowledge of a grade school teacher helping inform education policy about AI. I want education about a nurse practitioner who has frontline experience informing how AI systems respond to a mental health crisis about someone. I don't want an engineer in Silicon Valley to be in charge of that.
So there's generative AI, and then what's the other one?
Oh, there are many kinds of AI systems that are built. There's kind of two ways of looking at software. One is kind of rules-based, and the other is kind of emergent. It studies, it's called symbolic, is the first one. And the second one, it just looks at data and comes up with its own reasons. So the thing we have to be aware, even the people who are building these AI models don't really understand why they've come up with a certain answer at any time. You can't look in and say, oh, it did this, then it made this, and then it resulted in this. You can't really, they're so complex that even the people who build them can't fully tell you why it answered something. So we're trying to build very simplified versions of the AIs we've launched to the world, and poking and prodding and trying to do little experiments on these simplified versions to have a hope of understanding what the bigger models are doing. So that's okay for science. That's okay to build something. That's a great engineering thing. The question and the worry I have is we've already released these models out into the world. We're already doing this sort of large unregulated experiment at scale on the general public. And we don't yet know what are the potential risks, what version should we release. We're letting a company try it. And then if somebody does something bad with it, they go, oh, I guess that was maybe a problem and I should tweak it and change it. That's okay if you're releasing, an app and someone, has there's an error in my game and it makes some error and I can say, oh, I see there was an error. I can release a new version that fixes it. That's not true. That's not great in healthcare. There are lawsuits currently facing OpenAI and facing some of these character chatbots like character.ai for the effects they've had on the mental health of young people. And there's some court cases that are alleging suicides were to blame for the ways in which these AI bots responded to a young person in crisis, in some cases encouraging them to take their own life, in some cases pretending to some relationship with them, saying, I'll be waiting for you in the after. Like, they're very creepy things that are happening because no one thought ahead of time this might have happened. Let me put a restriction. Let me put some guardrails in place. Let me restrict the age. Let me restrict the models. Let me restrict the kinds of conversations and advice they're allowed to give. Let me maybe alert police at a certain case or alert mental health care professionals of a certain conversations happening. But right now there's a court case in BC after the terrible tragedy of the shooting that happened there, where the BC government is saying the chatbot making companies did not do enough when a conversation was happening on their servers that should have raised red flags. If it happened in public, if it happened on, in a message board, someone would have seen it and called the cops. That didn't happen in these cases. And so we haven't yet said how responsible these systems have to be. Do you need to test something in these ways beforehand? Do you need to be certified maybe by a government agency beforehand? Before you put this into my school, before you put this into the general public. Right now, you can release it, and then after there's a problem, you can say oops, and that doesn't feel great for something so mission critical.
Do you think that's really why, there was just this data released by the Angus Reid Institute suggesting that the use of AI is on the rise, but people are deeply skeptical, their words, of long-term impacts. So is that part of the problem here, that, things are sort of being put out there and it's let's see how it goes and we'll fix it later if we have to?
Yeah. I mean, it's a variety of things. I think you're right. How this was made, how it's being there, and the worries people are having, yet are using it. That's a very unusual state to be in. To be nervous, so nervous as this survey is pointing out. People are nervous in general in society. People are nervous in individual companies about whether they're using a chatbot as part of their work, but then the chatbot is being trained to replace the person who's using it, because now I'm asking these questions. I'm giving my own knowledge and expertise into this bot for free. So it's a very weird situation to be so nervous at, large swaths of the population are so nervous about things that they end up using so often. That's a really weird state to be in. But if in some cases it feels inevitable, you don't want to be left behind. You don't want to be the person at your job who doesn't become AI savvy and is therefore the first to go. You're hopeful that maybe I'll hold on to my job for longer if I become the expert. But there are certainly cases in some of the major tech companies It's hard to exactly say the effects on the actual practical effects on employment. There is some worry that we're in a bubble, that things are being overhyped, but nonetheless, yeah, people are uneasy about this. I would point out, and this is something I point out in the book, we're starting to have a reckoning about things like social media as a technology in society. We're worried about, mental health. We're worried about misinformation, and we're just starting to implement laws and rules, maybe social media bans, maybe age restrictions, maybe increased monitoring. We're just starting on that, and now we've already jumped into the next technology that is poised to make major changes to society without any of the lessons being learned of checks and balances and slowing down in some cases. Right now, there's still a gold rush. Every AI company, every country wants to be the first, the biggest, the fastest. The leaders in AI feel like they're only months ahead of their closest rivals, so they're constantly releasing and pushing. And I do think, in general, when I talk to people, there's some people who are very much boosters of this technology. They love it. But when I talk to the most people, even the ones who are getting value out of it, they're also nervous about it in some cases and in some use cases.
This is one of those topics that no one really wants to think about, but if you're a parent, a homeowner, married, or helping take care of aging parents, it's something that honestly deserves a little attention. I'm talking about estate planning. And before you tune out thinking it's complicated or expensive, that's actually why I want to mention Trust and Will. Trust and Will makes estate planning feel way less intimidating than it sounds. They offer modern, attorney-designed wills and trusts that you can create online. And the process is surprisingly straightforward. In fact, you can create a will in as little as 30 minutes. That includes things like guardianship for your kids or pets, how your assets are distributed, and even healthcare directives. Don't wait until it's too late. Protect your loved ones with Trust and Will, the most trusted name in online estate planning. Go to trustandwill.com/future to get 20% off. That's trustandwill.com/future for 20% off. trustandwill.com/future.
The other thing that I find very interesting is that there's, sort of a cost associated with all of this. And please correct me if I'm wrong, but, our phones are costing more, and there's this risk of electricity use and water use and energy use all over the place globally. We're starting to hear now more and more about these data centers that are necessary to sort of power all of this.
Yeah. There's the direct consumer costs, and then these bigger, larger environment, land, water costs. So individually, the cost of Apple has had to raise the price of all of the higher end devices 20% because they can't get computer chips, because it's a cascading effect. The high-end computer chips are all being bought up to be used for the biggest AI processing, training. And that means the low-end chips that would have been used by other devices are now not available. So somebody else is buying those, and it's cascading. Someone else is buying those. So the chips that you need to run everything, your automobile, your rice cooker, it's in a cascading effort. The costs are rising for all consumer electronics because so many things use chips now. It's very hard to get something that isn't a smart thermostat, smart version of whatever it is. So that's a direct cost to us. We're seeing this right now. But then, as you pointed out, there are these bigger social costs that some of these data centers are being built in, they're large, basically server farms, so they take a lot of space. They take a lot of water to cool the processors that are running. They take a lot of electricity at a time when we are facing, conversations about trying to switch to renewable energies, trying to reduce electrical demand so that we have some time to build up a renewable energy supply. And instead, we're increasing our energy demand at massive scales in order to do these, both the original training of these frontier models and also just the questions, inference, it's called, when you ask a question of a ChatGPT. It uses more energy to ask a question of a ChatGPT than it does to ask a question of Google. So Google was already running, any search engine was already running these huge server farms. Any online service you use has these big, like Amazon, has these big server farms that we access all the time. We already were wondering what's the impact of them. But it can take as much, it's not massive amounts of energy to just ask a little text question. That's something like running a microwave for 6 minutes to ask a little text prompt. But to generate an image is more, to generate video is more. And the companies have stopped telling us how much more because they've realized, wow, when you put those numbers together and there are billions of prompts and there are billions of users, fastest growing technology that from any technology use ever, it was the fastest to get to millions of users. It's embarrassing. They're worried. They're embracing maybe alternate energy. Major companies are investing in small nuclear reactors. They're trying to, maybe feel like they're good citizens, spending their money to maybe build new electricity on getting online. But also they consume a lot of electricity and they have to put the plants somewhere. So they are moving into where they can get a tax incentive, where they can find land, where they can find water. And in some cases, it's not always the best place as far as other water uses like people or farming.
I wonder if you think that Geoffrey Hinton, who's sort of been described as the godfather of AI, the British-Canadian computer scientist, he's sort of warned of, the dangers around AI. And do you think that his warning is being taken seriously?
Yeah, it's very fascinating. So Canada has had an interesting history, and Geoffrey Hinton and a number of other scientists. Canada was the birthplace of this modern version, the version of AI that's taking off. This generative AI came out of our research labs. And so many of those leading researchers have now stepped back to say, not quite I made a mistake, but I am now worried about the direction this is going. Geoffrey Hinton's one, Joshua Bengio in Montreal, has also come out in very particular ways where they're saying the technology is an enabling technology, but there can be ethical approaches and ethical ways to do this. There's a role for regulation. There's a role for sobriety and second thoughts. There's a role for deciding how and when you release certain versions of the technology. And we can build them in labs. That is because they can see the potential for what they helped invent. This is now, however, in the hands of huge companies who just have more money. They have more money to hire, scientists fresh out of research. They have more money to do the big, expensive computer processing it takes to crunch all this data. It can cost millions, tens of millions, possibly even hundreds of millions of dollars to train the newest version of one of these models. So it means that can't happen in a government lab. That can't happen in a research lab. So this is being driven by companies, and the ethics of companies are not the same thing as the ethics of a government, a local government, a community council, a First Nations band. These ethics are not the same. They may be driven by their vision of what they think is the good of society, but there is a profit motive. There is, particular groupthink that can happen out of a Silicon Valley mindset of, there's a little bit of trust us, get out of our way and trust us. We'll fix it. We understand. We know what we're doing. And that's not how civil society works. It's not a vote. I don't just trust someone else to pat me on the head and do what's best for me. Even though I'm not an expert in everything, I still have a right. The rules of civil society are very different than the rules of companies. And yeah, I think people like Geoffrey Hinton, it is very telling. They do get and understand the technology. I'm wondering if in the future we'll think of this as a Robert Oppenheimer moment. Like, what have I done? I'm still proud of the work I did, but I'm worried the direction it's going now that it's out of the lab and in the wild.
Just for people who, again, maybe aren't really entirely sure about uses of AI, can you offer a specific example of something where it has you concerned, its usage has you concerned?
So one set of practices, which maybe some of your listeners have heard about, is voice cloning. So it is now possible with just like maybe a 6-second sample of my voice talking to you right now, 6 seconds of that saying anything, to make a cloned version of my voice that will sound almost indistinguishable from me. It will have the intonations I use. It'll have the pauses. I have a little speech impediment over certain letters. It'll pick those up. And now there's something that can speak as I speak. And so some of the same scammers that were active, for decades now online, trying to get people to reveal their bank account information with a nasty email, now can make a phone call to my mother and play a voice that sounds like me in trouble or asking for help or asking for, can you just go to your computer? I'm going to help you set up your bank account. I've got a new thing for you. Can you just tell me your password again? I'll set up the Netflix or something for you. It is now very hard. So that the same rules I used to give to people to say, here's now signs for maybe what not to touch, to trust on the internet in terms of a video or provenance, where does this photo come from? Now those signs are going away. It sounds like me. It looks like, it's a real video shot, in a war zone on CNN. It looks like a photo that was shot in this particular location. And a lot of the tells we would have for something fake are going away. That's very worrying because it now means bad actors, scammers can operate at massive scale because a computer is making these phone calls, not a person in a phone bank, can call thousands of people, and it only needs a few of those to hit in order to make money.
I mean, there is AI for good as well. So I guess my question to you is what it's costing us financially and otherwise. Today, in this moment, in your opinion, is it worth it?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm gonna put it into, I think the AI, we have three categories. I think there's AI for good, and I think there's fantastic good that will come. It will take a while because it's happening at the speed of drug discovery. It's happening at the speed of new designs. There may be new designs to help with climate change, for example, new technologies, new chemicals, and we're going to have to burn a lot of fuel to get the processing to get those good. There's the second category, I think, is maybe AI for, there's a great phrase I heard recently, premium mediocrity. And that's things that are just not that good. But frankly, a lot of stuff we do doesn't have to be that good. That's AI that's helping you write a little report. And you did the important part, but there's a bunch of other paragraphs that are just wordsmithing. And it has to be exactly 153 words. AI can do that. It can save you time then. And that time is precious. That could be time you were spending on things you actually want to do in life. And then there's AI that can be bad actors. Where I am, and I think the point I try to make in the book is that which of these paths we get, we're going to get some of all of them. It's inevitable we will get some of all three. But it's not inevitable the proportion. This can happen in a way that steers us towards anything goes, in which case I think we're going to see a lot more bad effects of this environmentally as well as in society, in jobs, and in scams. And there's a path where we still get some of the benefits. We get as many of them as we can while minimizing the bad. And that's going to require us to be more thoughtful about the deployment of technology. Not, it's new, therefore we should use it. But sometimes we say, no, I don't want to use it in cases where it's important for a machine to tell me why it made the choice, why I didn't get a loan. I make a person tell me why I didn't get a loan because it can't be about race. It can't be about gender. It can't be about religion. It can't be about sexuality. That's not, you can't deny me a loan for that. And if a person does it, they get prosecuted. If a machine does it and it can't tell me why, then maybe I can't use the machine for those questions. I can use them for other ones, but not these ones. So I think there are ways, conversation that we can have, and I'm hopeful that the worries, we're getting to be a more educated society where people are rejecting technology, not wholeheartedly, but they're saying, hey, maybe I'm going to put my cell phone down when I walk in the door because I'm having family time with my kids. So I'm making a choice about technology. Maybe I'm going to put a landline in. Maybe I'm going to be aware of when I'm scrolling and put a timer on so I don't do that too much. We're starting to say, I want benefits. I know there are risks to it, and so I'm being more selective about it. And I hope that will then lead to us in these places to say, hey, in my job, I don't run these companies. I'm not a big, policy maker, but in my company, the option was to make this product choice. And I can raise my hand and say, hey, how is it dealing with this problem? Maybe we should say no to this, not out of fear, but because I know my job and I know this isn't the right place for it. Or this is a place where I think it's going to be okay. I want us to take the choices and make the choices in our families, individually, in our jobs where we can. And then, yes, have it be a voting issue. Have it be a pressure on our governments, because there are some things in Canada that we do have the ability to have privacy legislation that helps us have the right kind of regulation that's going to meet the Canadian landscape, not one from Silicon Valley.
Well, I thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today and to sort of outline all of this. Thank you. And thank you for writing the book, too. It's one of those subjects I think people are keen to get more info on. So any truth that can be put out there, I think, is helpful in this moment.
That's great. Thank you so much for having me and talking about the issue.
Richard Lachman is professor of digital media at Toronto Metropolitan University. He's also the author of Digital Wisdom, Searching for Agency in the Age of AI. And that wraps up another episode of In This Economy. Previous episodes can be accessed on the Seeker app. I'm Kris McCusker. Thanks for listening.